Welcome to Best Disc Golf Discs video guide series. My name is Bart Bird, and in this episode we'll be covering backhand versus forehand driver selection. Topics today will include the key differences between backhand and forehand drives, specific disc requirements for backhand distance, and specific disc requirements for forehand distance. Let's start off with a drive comparison of two drives of 300 feet. And for each of these drives, we're going to look at the throwing style, the release velocity, the initial spin, and the time in flight. For a backhand throw, typical data for a 300-foot drive would be 57 mile per hour release velocity, about 2,000 RPMs in initial spin, and a time in flight of 5.4 seconds. A typical 300-foot forehand drive, on the other hand, would be more like 62 miles per hour and 1,600 RPMs, and only 4.9 seconds of time in flight. Again, both drives traveled 300 feet, but with very different flights. In this video, we'll be discussing how do you increase the release velocity of the backhand disc, and how do you prevent the premature slowing of the forehand disc. Beginning our analysis with backhand distance, it has been proven that the most important factor in driving distance in a backhand drive is the release velocity in miles per hour. Carrying the analysis forward, with the most important variable in flight distance being release velocity, the most important variable in release velocity is disc weight. From the studies that have been conducted, we know that drives between 40 and 70 miles per hour, which encompasses about 90% of all players, for each 1 gram in weight reduction of the disc, you'll get an average of 2.35 additional feet. Now, this doesn't sound like a lot, but extrapolating that out, with a 20 gram weight drop in your disc, players could expect to see an average of 47 feet of additional distance, driven by the increase in release velocity from being able to throw a lighter disc more quickly. Looking at the world distance records for disc golf, it's no surprise that the current world distance record for a backhand drive was done with a disc that weighed only 154 grams, with all of the top 5 throws of all times being with discs in the 137 to 157 gram category. Going back now to our initial comparison, while we see that for backhand the key is selecting a disc that will allow you to increase your release velocity, for forehand discs, when you have a higher release velocity paired with lower spin and RPMs, a totally new set of challenges arise. Looking at our digital display, discs in flight rotate around their axis, but any energy that's applied to the disc through the throwing motion that's not in line with the axis of rotation is off-axis torque, which we see as disc wobble or flutter upon release. Off-axis torque is much more common with forehand throws, but it's important to note that off-axis torque is not caused by low spin RPM, it's actually caused by the throwing motion. Studies have shown that forehand throws with a clean release will show little or no wobble and have more than enough spin to provide stable flight. However, lower spin RPM typically seen with forehand throws does decrease their torque resistance, and throws with higher release velocities are more impacted by the effects of off-axis torque. The result of off-axis torque is increased air turbulence, which creates two problems. The first problem is excessive turnover, producing suboptimal flight lines and less predictable flight patterns. The second problem is degraded aerodynamics, resulting in a more rapid loss of velocity, decreased flight time, and ultimately decreased distance. When selecting discs to fight against the turbulence caused by off-axis torque, players have two paths they can take. The first is to manage the turbulence, which can be accomplished by using discs with flatter profiles that produce less turbulence. Additionally, players can select discs that are more overstable to reduce the amount of turnover generated by the turbulence. The second way to fight turbulence is to use disc configurations that are more resistant to off-axis torque. The first option here is to use discs with wide rims. Widening the disc's rim shifts the disc's weight to the perimeter, increasing its rotational inertia and thereby also increasing its gyroscopic stability, which in turn increases its torque resistance. The second option is to increase the disc's total weight. Many of you, of course, are thinking that we just discussed the fact that heavier discs don't fly as far as lighter discs. And while this is undoubtedly true in a general sense, when you're dealing with the turbulence from off-axis torque, the benefit of reduced turbulence outweighs the benefit of reduced weight. This fact even proves itself to be true at the highest level, where the distance world record for forehand throws is with a 168-gram discs, 14 grams heavier than the backhand record holder. As a practical example, let's say you're experiencing off-axis torque wobble and your current driver is a 160-gram Valkyrie. A better option could be a 170-gram Firebird. It has a flatter profile to reduce turbulence, 10 grams heavier to increase torque resistance, and increase stability to fight the turnover caused by off-axis torque turbulence. Some, but not all of these concepts can be used to explain why the overhand disc record was actually made with a 177-gram disc, but that's another video. So we hope this helps. Click on the links above to see related videos or subscribe to our website for instant access to free member-exclusive videos. Until next time, thanks for watching and have a great round.